Yo, yo, pound that thumbs up, lock in the follow, and slam that alert bell, because the story I am about to unpack tonight is the loudest one hip-hop and pop culture has coughed up all week, and if you blink you are going to miss the receipts. This is the corner of the internet where the industry gets read for filth without a public relations babysitter standing over my shoulder. So settle in, silence the group chat, and let me walk you through it. Because the dominoes falling tonight are going to change the way you look at three of the biggest names in this business by the time we hit the outro. Andrew Tate. Let's just start where the flames are highest, because Andrew Tate got scooped up by the feds, and the pictures that leaked out of that Miami holding lobby are, and I mean this with my whole chest, some of the strangest imagery the man of fear has ever had to explain away. The man who built an empire yelling about masculinity walked into a federal building looking like he was auditioning for a completely different casting call, and now the whole internet is trying to decode what we all just saw. Catch that? The alpha of alphas got clipped, and the visual that got clipped with him is going to live on the timeline forever. There is no coming back from an image like that. Screenshots do not expire. Reels do not sleep. Andrew Tate walked out of that vehicle and simultaneously walked out of the aesthetic Andrew Tate spent 5 years building. Now, understand my position on this. I am not one of these guys who wakes up hating Andrew Tate. Some of what Andrew Tate says out loud is common sense front porch advice. Get in the gym. Stop crying. Take care of your mother. Invest in yourself before you invest in anybody else. That is not controversial. That is the same speech every uncle has been giving in every barbershop since the beginning of time. But some of what Andrew Tate has been saying lately is off-the-rails serial territory, and it feels like the pressure of being the most watched man online has quietly rewired something upstairs. Fame does that to people. Attention is a drug, and Andrew Tate has been mainlining it for 3 years straight. Whether Andrew Tate is guilty of every single accusation stacked against him is a separate conversation, and I want to be careful with my words here, because I do not know what happened behind closed doors, and neither do you. What I will tell you is that certain governments have decided they want Andrew Tate in a cage, and once a machine that size starts spinning, one single charge sticking is all it takes. The United Kingdom is not the same country it was 5 years ago. I am not talking about the citizens. I am talking about the government apparatus, the courts, the prosecutorial mood, the political oxygen in that building. And if Andrew Tate ends up on a plane over there, the runway may as well be a one-way ticket. That is not a metaphor. That is a math problem. You do not need a majority of the accusations to be true. You need one. Here is the part that kills me. Andrew Tate was begging for this. Every single week, Andrew Tate was on live streams taunting law enforcement, daring them to come get him, laughing at the courts, treating the whole situation like it was a wrestling storyline. When you finally slip out of a jail cell, the correct move is to disappear into a quiet villa and eat pasta for a year. The correct move is to unplug the microphone, uninstall the app, and let the news cycle chew on somebody else. The correct move is not to grab a camera and dare the government to knock on your door again. And on top of that, and this is the part nobody has an answer for, nobody, and I mean nobody, can actually explain to me on paper how Andrew Tate and his brother make their money. Every interviewer punts on the question. Every fan repeats the same 3 phrases. That silence is the story. That silence is the entire story. When the money is loud, but the ledger is quiet, somebody eventually shows up with handcuffs. Alright, let's shift lanes. Drake. Drake sat down with Adam 22 the other day and drop-kicked the entire Lefty Gunplay narrative into the ocean. Drake basically said Lefty Gunplay was never in the running for a feature, never sent a beat back, never turned Drake down. Which, if you think about it for even 4 seconds, makes total sense. Why on earth would Drake be chasing a Lefty Gunplay verse? It was never going to happen, and Drake calling that out publicly is Drake reminding everyone that most of the Drake got rejected storylines floating around are fan fiction made in a group chat. That is the honest truth. Half the industry rumors you hear about Drake are somebody's second cousin's Instagram caption with a screenshot filter on it. Which brings me to the reason we should all be paying closer attention to Dame Dash, because Dame Dash has now officially wandered into off-the-rails serial territory himself, and once you see the full arc, You understand exactly why Jay-Z had to cut Dame Dash loose 2 decades ago. Rewind the tape. Dame Dash and Jay-Z were supposed to build us, Carter Records together. Doc Carter was the branding. That was going to be Jay-Z's imprint under the Roc-A-Fella umbrella, a whole new lane engineered specifically for Jay-Z's solo trajectory. But Jay-Z had a bigger vision. Jay-Z was quietly negotiating to bring Roc-A-Fella back under Jay-Z's own control, fold the whole operation into what would eventually become Roc Nation, and lock in the Live Nation partnership that today prints money in Jay-Z's sleep. That is not a coincidence. That is a 5-move chess game that Jay-Z has been running since before most rappers today were even out of middle school. Meanwhile, Dame Dash was doing the opposite of ascending. From roughly 1996 to about 2001, Dame Dash was the coolest executive in the building. For coats, TV appearances, sneaker deals, magazine covers, the whole thing. Dame Dash was a walking magazine feature. And then Dame Dash hit that fork in the road where every powerful executive has to decide who they actually are, and Dame Dash decided he wanted to be a rapper. Dame Dash wanted to be Diddy. See what I am saying? Dame Dash saw Puff Daddy stepping to the front of the stage, and Dame Dash confused proximity with talent. But here is the thing nobody wants to say out loud. Diddy did not do it by himself either. Diddy needed Biggie. Craig Mack was cool, Craig Mack was a foot in the door, but Biggie was the missing piece that pushed Bad Boy over the top and turned that label into a monster. And Dame Dash's Biggie was Jay-Z. And Dame Dash's money guy was Biggs Burke. So when Dame Dash tried to step to the front and reinvent Dame Dash as a headline artist, Dame Dash was, without realizing it, replacing the 2 people who were carrying the whole operation. The problem with Dame Dash then, and the problem with Dame Dash now, is that Dame Dash cannot help but make an enemy out of every room he enters. Dame Dash was the bad cop, and Jay-Z was the good cop, and the executives at Def Jam and the corporate structure above them looked at that pairing and made a decision that changed the game forever. They walked up to Jay-Z with an offer too good to refuse: come run Def Jam, and we will hand you Roc-A-Fella once you talk them into selling it. And Jay-Z, being the strategist Jay-Z has always been, accepted the deal without breaking a sweat. And I do not blame Jay-Z. I do not blame Jay-Z for a single second of that decision, because Dame Dash had become an anchor tied to the ankle of one of the most talented artists of the last 50 years. You cannot swim to the top of the ocean with an anchor on your foot. That is not being disloyal. That is being a survivor. Now, would I have loved to see a different ending? Absolutely. In a perfect world, Dame Dash keeps running Roc-A-Fella, Jay-Z keeps his ownership stake, Jay-Z launches a satellite imprint on the side, and the 2 of them stay allied even while chasing different visions. That is the version of the story I would put on a t-shirt. But Dame Dash would never have allowed that. Dame Dash would have spent every waking hour trying to sabotage Jay-Z out of pride. So Jay-Z did the only chess move available. Jay-Z humbled Dame Dash, bought the label back for pennies on the dollar, walked in as the head of Def Jam, secured Jay-Z's own masters, secured the artists Jay-Z cared about, and then launched Roc Nation from a position of total control. That is not luck. That is patience weaponized. That is the kind of long game most artists cannot even conceptualize, let alone execute. And what did Dame Dash do during that same window? Dame Dash disappeared into art projects, indie film ventures, streetwear experiments, cryptocurrency detours, none of which ever gained real traction, and every time Dame Dash resurfaced, Dame Dash was angrier than the last appearance. Dame Dash is the type of person who cannot get out of Dame Dash's own way. Dame Dash is not built for gratitude. If somebody helps Dame Dash frames it as a debt that was owed. If somebody feeds Dame Dash a meal, Dame Dash calls it a business deal. Nobody in the industry wants to reach a handout to Dame Dash anymore because Dame Dash has trained the whole town to expect a lawsuit or a lecture in return. That is not opinion. That is Dame Dash's own resume. Pull the receipts. Every single business partner Dame Dash has ever had has a story. Every single one. Which is exactly why Drake's next few sentences on that Adam 22 sit-down matter more than people realize. Drake said, and I quote the vibe not the syllables, Drake said Drake was Kai Cenat with the streams before Kai Cenat ever went live. Drake said Drake was pulling numbers on YouTube that made the current streaming economy possible. And Drake is not wrong about that either, because if you look at the graph of hip-hop streaming from 2011 forward, Drake is the entire graph. Drake is the load-bearing pillar. And this right here, is where you have to zoom out and look at what happened to Rick Ross, because Rick Ross has not had a real chart-moving debut since the day Drake stopped answering Rick Ross's phone calls. Track the timeline. In 2023, Rick Ross dropped a joint album with Meek Mill. Drake could have easily jumped on any record on that project. The Gamma distribution deal was already in place. Larry Jackson is friendly with Drake. The doors were wide open. The invitation was on the table. But something had already shifted. Drake had already quietly realized that helping Meek Mill in that season was going to be interpreted as helping Rick Ross by proxy, and Drake was no longer interested in doing Rick Ross that favor. Drake had already extended the olive branch to Meek Mill years earlier when Meek Mill came home. Drake did the collaboration. Drake showed up. Drake did his part. Drake ate the criticism for it, and after that, Drake seems to have decided that Drake and Meek Mill are cool as human beings, but Drake and Meek Mill are not going to share credits on records anymore. Clean break. Warm hug. Different lanes. Rick Ross took that personally. Rick Ross saw Drake say the syllable that starts with N, and Rick Ross has never recovered from hearing it. That right there is the real fuel behind the Rick Ross diss campaign. It is not the French Montana story. It is not some ancient sample clearance beef. The French Montana angle is a smokescreen designed to make the beef sound principled. The truth is that Rick Ross is somebody whose ego cannot process rejection. So when everybody else piled on Drake in the summer of the Great Rap War, Rick Ross grabbed a plate and joined the buffet. Because for Rick Ross, that was the moment Rick Ross had been waiting for. Rick Ross had been sitting on that resentment for years, storing it up like a Christmas fund, and the day the culture gave Rick Ross permission to swing, Rick Ross swung with everything Rick Ross had. And think about the layers here. When the Meek Mill and Drake beef was happening a decade ago, Rick Ross should have been at the front of the parade defending Meek Mill, because Meek Mill was signed to Rick Ross's label and Meek Mill was, in every meaningful business sense, Rick Ross's flagship artist at that time. But Rick Ross did not fire a single public shot at Drake back then. Rick Ross went quiet. Rick Ross went diplomatic. Rick Ross went let the young men figure it out. So do not tell me now that Rick Ross has a moral objection to Drake. That does not add up. Fast forward, Rick Ross and Meek Mill did about 33,000 units first week on that project. That is roughly the neighborhood Rick Ross is going to keep landing in going forward. Rick Ross has a new record now called Porsche GT3 where Rick Ross is very obviously borrowing Kendrick Lamar's cadence, that stuttered, syllabic, Porsche, torch, corridor, flow that Kendrick Lamar owns the copyright to spiritually. And it is loaded with features. Feature after feature after feature. And if Rick Ross still only lands somewhere between 30 and 50,000 first week, that is not a disaster, but it is not a win either. It could have been worse. Rick Ross could have printed 15. But Tory Lanez, and this is wild, Tory Lanez is projected to outsell Rick Ross while Tory Lanez is literally sitting in a prison cell. Read that sentence twice. A man in a jumpsuit is beating a man in a Rolls Royce on the first week Billboard sheet. Tell me the culture is not sending a message. Now, if Lil Wayne quietly starts appearing next to Rick Ross in public again, Drake should absolutely raise an eyebrow. Not a war, not a diss, just an eyebrow, because there is a version of loyalty that whispers, and Drake would be within his rights to ask why one of Drake's closest mentors is breaking bread with somebody actively campaigning against Drake. That is a fair question. That is not paranoia. Rick Ross is a wobbling compass. Rick Ross was silent when Meek Mill went at Drake back in the day. Rick Ross stopped speaking to French Montana when French Montana chose Drake. Rick Ross is friends with French Montana again now that it is convenient. You cannot pin Rick Ross's positions to a wall because Rick Ross's positions change with the wind. And a wobbling compass gets people lost. A wobbling compass costs friendships. Real quick sidebar. This guy Chris Griffith who keeps popping up in these celebrity lawsuits, I saw the mother of one of his children breaking down her side of the story, and I have to tell you, Chris Griffith is functionally an ambulance chaser at this point. Every other week, Chris Griffith is announcing a new case against a new celebrity. So when I see Stefon Diggs on that list, I do not automatically assume the accusation sticks. Stefon Diggs has a personality that rubs people the wrong way. Stefon Diggs is, and I say this with love, kind of a jerk. Stefon Diggs is one of those people who will end a friendship over text message and then wonder why the phone stops ringing. And when you move through the world like that, people wait for the moment to swing back at you. That is the actual mechanism at work here, not necessarily the underlying claim. Being unlikable is not illegal, but being unlikable makes you a magnet for legal drama, and Stefon Diggs is currently pulling metal filings out of the air. Cardi B went live on Instagram and confirmed with her own mouth that Cardi B is dating Mook Aois. That is a date. A real one. Nothing scandalous about it. But of course, the second Cardi B said it out loud, Mook's baby mother appeared with the classic script. He was nothing before me. I built him. I created him. He owes me his entire personality. That is a story as old as the industry itself. No shade to Cardi B, but Cardi B has a track record of choosing partners who come with a chorus of ex-partners behind them. Cardi B is going to have to guard the perimeter on this one, because the moment a new woman steps into that spotlight next to a man who already has a public co-parent, the timeline turns into a war zone within 48 hours. Now here is a prediction I want you to bookmark and come back to. DJ Khaled announced that DJ Khaled is pushing the new DJ Khaled album back because DJ Khaled was inspired by Drake's recent live shows. That is not the real reason. Let me give you the real reason. Roc Nation is not going to let DJ Khaled fail on this rollout. Behind the curtain, Roc Nation is quietly assembling a rescue package. I would not be shocked if Rihanna emerges from retirement for a single feature on this project just to move units. Jay-Z will almost certainly appear on a track. Lil Wayne will likely bless a verse. Rick Ross will get his spot. And do not fall out of your chair if Kendrick Lamar's name pops up in the credits too, because the entire strategy right now inside Roc Nation is to build a wall of stars around any project that is not featuring Drake. That is the play. That is the whole play. It is not about what Drake likes anymore. It is about what Drake does not touch. The industry is quietly stress testing whether a hit record can be manufactured without Drake's fingerprints, and DJ Khaled is going to be the pilot episode. Meanwhile, Drake is being showcased like a monarch. Late-night television spots, plaque ceremonies for record sales that go up like coordinated fireworks, the big talking point number of 80 million records and 20 billion streams flashing across every screen. That plaque, by the way, is enormous. Somebody is going to need a moving truck just to get it back to Miami. But look at what is being telegraphed. Drake is being positioned as the last name standing on the marquee, while every rival camp assembles counter-armies. This is not organic. This is a season, and the season has choreography. Every camera angle is a message. Every guest appearance is a statement. Every plaque is a scoreboard. Alright, palate cleanser before we wrap. You know what I would legitimately pay money to see on a streaming platform? Exhibit reacting to old episodes of Pimp My Ride. Exhibit already admitted on record that Exhibit was horrified by what the show's crew was doing to those cars behind the scenes. Slot machines welded into door panels. Fake doctors' offices installed in trunks. Fish tanks. Popcorn machines. Cars that were structurally destroyed the moment the cameras stopped rolling. Exhibit has said the crew handed Exhibit a finished vehicle and Exhibit had no idea half of it was a prop, no idea half of it would fall off in the driveway. Somebody get Exhibit and a laptop in a room and let Exhibit narrate the disaster in real time. That is a viral franchise waiting to happen. Reality television needs Exhibit to close that loop. Alright, that is where I am pulling the plug tonight. This is Jordan Tower with JT News. If you rode with me all the way to the end of this one, pound that thumbs up, lock in the follow, slam that alert bell, and drop your read in the comments and roll straight into the follow-up clip on your right. Who do you actually think is running the strongest hand right now? Drake, Kendrick Lamar, Rick Ross, or Jay-Z from behind the curtain? Tell me. I will be reading every single one of them. Have a beautiful day, take care of the people around you, and remember I am nothing without you. Peace.